citizens, for every citizen. It didn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, male or female, black or white. It made no difference. If you're a person, a human being, he cares about you. And he shows that. I know you've got some supporters here. So with that, I want to introduce you to what I hope, and I pray, and I will work for, will be the next state of California.
You're the best. Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Danielle, I think I'm going to pass this on to you. We're going to get in conversation, but I could spend all night having a conversation about your governor, and I'm very grateful for those words. I'm grateful for your friendship, and a friendship that's only strengthened over the course of the last year or so as we're comparing notes. And I know my status. I got a sell-by date. I'm a milk carton. In about 10 months, I'll be the ex-governor of California. So I'm hoping someone returns my phone calls as well then. And so it is wonderful to be here with you, Governor, and we'll brag on you in a moment. But I want to also just brag on you, Danielle. Thank you for inviting everybody here. Thank you for bringing people together. Because this is, literally the first full week of this book tour that has brought me to a few places. You may have read about some of these places, not the tour itself in South Carolina, and we were down in Georgia and in Tennessee and up in New York. We just came back from Los Angeles this morning and up in the Bay Area, and I'll be heading out back east later tomorrow morning in the next few days. And it's just been an extraordinary adventure, just being able to meet people, like-minded people that are all here for each other. And for this country, and just to address all that anxiety, that fear, and to be the antidote to the cynicism that marks so much of our politics today. So again, all of you, gratitude, respect, appreciation. Thank you all for coming tonight for this conversation. All right, Danielle.
Okay, all right.
There we go.
Can you hear me? All right. Well, Governor, I want to say thank you for visiting Nevada. Now, this isn't his only stop here today. He didn't tell you he was out in Boulder City, because you can't just win in your urban cores. You have to get out in the entire state, and especially in our rurals. And thank you for recognizing that and doing that. I know you've been kind of busy, but you had a great crowd out there today, from what I hear. They loved having you there. I'm excited that you're here. As someone who just filed to run for mayor for the city of North Las Vegas, I'm going to be picking your brain about, after reading the book, I know there's some more you can share with me about what I should not do as the next mayor, but thank you.
I will say, once a mayor, always a mayor. I mean, and that mayoral mindset is profoundly important in terms of any endeavor. But I will say, more important than mayoral mindset, I started in the restaurant business and ran a few, similar outfits as this. So let me also thank our hosts for hosting us today in the Brew Club. And I say that was the best training ever to be mayor of San Francisco, was running a bar all those years. Just saying.
Well, my side hustle was event planning. My girlfriend was a caterer, but we didn't get as popular as you did. So I can take some lessons there as well. Wow. In reading the book, and I got to tell you, I cheated, and I got the audio version, and I got the book, but you shared a lot. I learned a lot about you, things I thought I knew. From
things you didn't want to know. Yes, there's plenty of that, too.
You spend those first few chapters talking about, in detail, about your rich family history in San Francisco and the San Francisco Bay Area. Your family's been there for 6 generations?
Yeah, right, my kids, 6 generations of San Franciscans, which is not very inventive and imaginative. I think we were within about a 6-square-block area. My father used to joke about San Francisco. He said he didn't know what came first, the Irish cop, his great-grandfather, or San Francisco. And so it's been, in every way, shape, or form, a city of dreamers, doers, entrepreneurs, innovators. A city that, by the way, was best described as 47 square miles surrounded by reality, which is sort of an interesting way to talk about that city by the bay.
I love that. So all of that shaped you into who you are now. The stories of growing up and you being bullied.
Well, a lot of that. No, it's interesting. So I wrote this book. The real reason I wrote this, can I share that?
Please do. Please do.
Not the, not the book tour version. Because, let's establish the obvious. A politician coming out with a book in Nevada just seems, if you're not rolling your eyes, you have every right to roll your eyes. I won't be offended. But so the timing of this book was I never imagined it would be this year. This was a book that was supposed to come out 2 years ago. Penguin Press, that is the publisher, and Ann Godoff, one of the really remarkable publishers and editors, who interestingly and tragically passed away the day that this was released. And she's a legend in the business. She wanted me to write a book, and Steve, you were part of it. We were talking about our time with Trump 1.0 and all the travails and the stresses and the anxieties. I mean, you reminded me of those fires that crossed over the Sierras. It was the first time we'd ever seen anything like this. Time when people were, torn asunder, not just because of that, but mis and disinformation, people saying climate change was a hoax. We had a president at the time was telling the governor and I that all we need to do to solve the wildfires is rake our forests. If you remember those days. So I wrote that book. I wrote that book about working with Trump and trying to work through Trump and around him during COVID, talked about the wildfires, droughts, floods, talked about the largest utility in the United States of America going bankrupt and impacts with PG&E, et cetera, and talked about relationships with governors like yours and relationships and partnerships that we formed across the United States that continue today to be an antidote, again, to Trump and Trumpism. I submitted the book, and I'll never forget, it was on Zoom, and Ann had just read it. I'm so excited. It's finally there. Spent 2 years working on it. We submit it, and you could just feel through the Zoom she wanted to have anything to do with it. And I'm like, and I cut her off before she could even say a word. I said, I get it. There's a chapter on my childhood. I'll take it out. I could tell you don't like that. And she goes, no, that's the only part of the book I liked. I'm like, damn. And it wasn't because she didn't like all the others. She said, we're exhausted by COVID. Like, I don't, like, we don't need another. People just want to, we've been so traumatized, the stacking of stress, right? And so polarized, et cetera. And she goes, I thought I knew you. But I didn't know about your mom being 19. She had you. I didn't know she was divorced 2 years later. I didn't know she came from no wealth, nor did your father. I just assumed you were born in a suit. You were born as, the stork said you're a politician, the whole thing. She really believed that. And I imagine many of you may even believe that. And so that became the origin story where I had to go back over these last 3 years and take one chapter and then actually develop a strategy to actually tell a real story that's deeper and richer, but one that's not sanitized, where I really try to go deep and scrutinize who I am. But it became, yes, this young man in a hurry, the mask I put on, the pose that I put on. I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, our first duty in life is to have a pose. The second duty, no one's really figured out. And I feel like I'm in that second phase of my life, but I put on that mask, and my face started to grow into it, becoming someone I didn't even recognize, my mother didn't recognize, and I write about that in the book. But it ultimately became a memoir of discovery. I learned about my parents and the things they never talked about. I didn't know why they got divorced. My mom passed away 20 years ago. My dad made it through election night. He literally survived to see his son get elected. And so I had to go back, and I had to discover things about them, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, that explain more things in more ways today than I ever understood or knew. My insecurities, my overcompensation for them, why my hands sweat and my stomach has butterflies, all these things. And it's been an extraordinary journey. I learned about why my parents just got divorced, and it was because my father ran for elected office and lost his first race for county supervisor, ran right away for a second time in 1968 to run for state senate and lost, and was broke and broken and just took off. Had a breakdown, leaving my mom to fend for herself, to all the single moms out there. My gosh. And working 2, 3 jobs her entire life. I list them all out. aid to adoption of special kids, helping those with intellectual and physical disabilities. She worked as a waitress at Romano's restaurant. She was out there hustling part-time doing bookkeeping and accounting. We always had roommates and strangers in the house because she was in the living room renting out the bedroom because she was struggling like so many do to pay the bills, pay the rent. We were a foster family growing up. And all those things I started to explore in a deeper and richer way. And it's ultimately a love letter to Mom. It's a love letter to my parents and their journey and their sacrifice.
You know, in reading the book, I kind of fell in love with your mom because my life started in foster care. And my parents were foster parents, and there was always people in our home. There was one time that there was a family that the sisters had been left by their husbands, moved in together, and they had 14 children. And one week, the kids were going to school, and then they kind of stopped going to school. And they found out that the mothers had left to get food but never came back. And the older children were taking care of the younger children but didn't want to tell anyone because they didn't want to get their parents in trouble. When my mom got the call from social services, they're like, can you take a few of the kids because they all have chickenpox? And my mom said, no, we're taking them all. Because they've already had separation. We're not going to do anything more. So in reading the story about your mom, reminded me of the wonderful woman who adopted me and was my mom. So I fell in love with your mom in reading this book.
God bless. And I love that. It's so interesting. I mean, just, one of the things about life is how messy it is. And you know what? It's okay. And back to this young man in a hurry frame and just, trying to be someone I wasn't. I was always trying to overcompensate for that, right? Trying to be that person. And now it's just this notion of just letting go. And you may even see it in terms of, how I'm conducting myself today as it relates to going after Trump and, our social media, just sort of letting it go. And, trust me, I'm not being cautious or timid, in that respect. And, all of that is just, and it's so important in our life. I tell young people, and there's a few young folks here, what advice do you have? I said, learn from, don't follow others. Your expression's unique. No one else has it. In so much of our life, we try to be like someone else, and we never discover who we are. And at the end of the day, that's the journey. And, we'll get, sometimes it, takes a breakdown to ultimately, discover that person that you always were. And so I just, that's, I don't want to belabor the point, but this is the book. If you came in for, 10 principles to restore America's trust and future, to bring America, from resistance to renewal, maybe that's the next book, but it's not this one.
Well, you've always been a fighter and a leader, from, breaking the rules when it came to the marriage license for same-sex marriages, Yeah, and your fight for, responsible gun ownership and, and your climate control battle, right? And we're seeing that,
it's interesting. One of the things that I write extensively about, and again, something I think many of you may share your own personal journey, know people that have struggled with learning disabilities. But I don't read speeches because I can't read speeches. I struggled all my life with pretty severe dyslexia. And at the time, we really didn't name it. And I talk about how I discovered all of these reports in my mom's office. Came home early one day, and there was a file open, and it revealed itself to me why I was going to these classes after school, wondering why most of my classmates weren't there. In fact, by the way, my foster brothers were folks that were in those remedial classes with me. Larry Joe Bonner and Stephen Ashby. And Suleiman Akabar, one of my other foster brothers, was at my book event in San Francisco, which was amazing. I had lost touch with him for years, and he's a big part of the book, and there he was with his kids. By the way, he had 11 brothers and sisters, so when you said 14.
Yeah, it's a lot.
He also is the reason, well, there's some fun stories in there. And
There's some really fun stories in
He
there.
did not always behave himself. Let's just establish some of that. But the point of the learning disability goes to your point, that, you struggle with that, but you start to overcompensate. But in that overcompensation, you find skills that you never otherwise would mind, you never otherwise would discover. But you also, by definition, have to learn how to iterate, trial and error. You're pretty good at making mistakes because you tend to make them a lot. But part of that is sort of a resiliency that comes with that. And so, I talk about this book. It's not about perfection. It's about, persistence. And how that has shaped me, shapes in so many ways this moment. But part of that iteration as well was a willingness to take risks. In 2004, when we weren't even debating civil unions, we weren't even to separate is equal. It was just domestic partnerships back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And Nancy Pelosi is the origin story here, made a mistake of inviting the new mayor of San Francisco almost 22 years to last week when the State of the Union occurred. And I went there, new mayor, and the congressional delegation, California, wanted to say hello to the new mayor. And so I was out there, and it was George Bush's re-election speech, State of the Union. And I was about to leave. I was with Nancy, and I was a bunch of other congressional representatives. And they said, well, what are you doing tonight? I said, well, I'm going to the hotel. I'll be leaving first thing in the morning. He said, do you want to stay? We have an extra ticket. Paul Pelosi doesn't want to go to the State of the Union. You can have his seat. And I said, what the heck? And so walked up there, the balcony, listened to George Bush's speech, and at the end of the speech, infamously, you can go back to that speech, he then announced, it is time for a constitutional amendment to make marriage the sacred marriage between only a man and a woman, and it just roars in applause. I walk out, and as one does, you can't bring your cell phone in, so you have to wait in line to get your cell phone, even back then. And I'll never forget, ever, Mayor, it was...
Oh, I love that. Yes.
I was then in line, and there was a couple right behind me. I can remember like it was yesterday. And they were talking. I was quietly just waiting. And they're like, what a great speech. We're so proud of our president. And then this young lady goes, and I'm just so sick and tired, and I remember how she said this, of the homosexual agenda. And how proud she was. And of course, just reflectively, I wanted to turn around and go, hi, I'm the new mayor of San Francisco. But I didn't do that. And I kind of just looked back, and I'm like, all right. And literally, it's like one of those things. It's like how life works, right? It's those moments. There's not thought, that was never part of the debate, never part of a conversation. There was no questionnaire, was not part of the agenda. Never thought it wasn't the first 100 days. And it was literally that moment I picked up the phone. Everyone's walking in one direction. I walked the opposite direction. And I only remember this because I went out the door and it was locked. I couldn't get back in on a cold night in the winter in D.C. And I made a phone call to my chief of staff. I said, we got to do something. And I didn't know if it was an op-ed. I didn't know if it was, a press release. I didn't know what. But a few days later, we were talking to an incredible couple, Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin. They've been together 49 years. They're the manifestation of what faith, love, devotion, and constancy is all about, what marriage is all about. And they agreed that they would be the face of a lawsuit that we'd file about the unconstitutionality of marriage in the state of California. And so word came out we were going to do this. Long story short, and there's some wonderful stories in here about my father who was very upset with me. Old Irish Catholic. What came first? Irish cop or San Francisco? That's West Side, if you know what I mean, San Francisco. UCSF and Father so-and-so and Archbishop, so you get it, the drift. My folks. And my dad tried to talk me out of it the night before, my Uncle Brennan and their friend who's an attorney, and I write about that in the book. But they ultimately didn't. And word got out that next morning we were going to marry the first same-sex couple. And the George Bush administration sent out the DOJ. And they were going to court, federal court, which is right across the street from City Hall. And at 9 a.m., they were getting a temporary restraining order to deny me the ability to do it. And I was a bit in a panic when I heard about this. I'm like, oh, this is not going to happen. And then I realized I was the mayor. Governor, and I can open up City Hall before 9 o'clock. You kind of have the power to do that. So I was like, Phyllis and Dell, you got to get here at 8, not 8:30. You got to get here at 8. And they got there at 8, and we did the ceremony. I was upstairs, and you'll never believe this. I didn't want to make it political. So I wasn't part of it. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And so they came up to my office, and we waited, 9:30. We were all together waiting for the court right across the street. 9:45, 10, 10:30. What's taking them so long? And then it came back, and I'll never forget the language. I'm not a lawyer, 960 SAT, so, I wasn't going to law school, I assure you that. Back to my dyslexia. And so the language that I never understood, they said the court decision came out, and there's no irreparable harm. I'm like, oh. And they're like, no, that's good. I said, there's no, that means you can continue. I said, continue what? I said, oh, you mean we could keep doing this? I said, I'm not prepared to keep doing this. And there were all these couples. They said, well, we've been together 30 years. We've been together 25. Does that count? And 4,035 couples later from 46 states and 6 countries came together in the, not summer of love, the winter of love in San Francisco in 2024. But there wasn't a lot of love in the Democratic Party. I mean, it was universal condemnation. You did not see me on the stage at the Democratic Convention that year. They made sure, they were like, you really don't have to come. Like, you're a new mayor, you should really focus on public transit and homelessness. And I eventually went, but I kind of avoided the stage. And it was hard, and there was a lot of soul searching in that, and I talk about that. And there was a lot of finger pointing, but it was also marked to consciousness. You get one, it's a moment in time. Back to my sell-by date. I'm very mindful of that. You're given a moment in time. And it's what are you going to do with it? And I look back at that, some of the greatest memories of my life are people randomly coming up to me years later, and just, saying, you don't know what that meant to me. And I'm like, I didn't know what 2 words, I do. And it's just the power of public service, the power of policy, but also the power of principle, standing up for convictions, being clear, and it was an act, of defiance. We challenged the law, but it was also about the rule of law. When the court said stop, we stopped. But we challenged what we believed at the time was an unjust law, and eventually we prevailed. And I think it's the spirit of this moment. We've got to have more conviction. We've got to be stronger in terms of our courage. We've got to be able to speak up for each other and those that are being spoken down to. And I think, I don't want to get too into it, and I forgive the long-windedness, but I was talking, Governor and I were just at the event, and we were talking about, this historic project. The Declaration of Independence, 250 years ago. And we're supposed to be celebrating. I don't feel like there's a lot of celebration in 2026 about the 250th anniversary, right? The co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, this notion of checks and balances. Not a lot of that with the supine Congress. This notion, well, we're going to try. You can bring that back. And this whole notion, and this is the most important one, this notion of the rule of law, back to the rule of law, not the rule of Don. And that's the moment here. I imagine that's why you're here. It's why we're all here. It's why I'm here. And it dawned on me, that for things to change, we have to change. And a year ago, I was a little down on us. Not you, like us. All the elect. I was like, where's my party? I was like, this is not going so well. Like, we are, we're hand-wringing, a lot of finger pointing, and like a sense of weakness, and just incapable of dealing with this moment, this existential moment, this fire and fury, this guy flooding the zone, dominating the narrative, the propaganda networks 24/7, illusion rules, facts don't matter. This guy who wants to bring us back to a pre-1960s world. I used to think it was 1960s, maybe 1860s. America in reverse, voting rights, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights. And so we need to change for things to change. Society becomes how we behave. And so I started to take, a little account to my own complicity at this moment. And this happened on my watch. This is all happening on our watch. And so I recognized that I needed to do better. And that really came to, with clarity when Donald Trump made that infamous phone call to Greg Abbott, where he said to Abbott, I'm entitled, just think about that word, I'm entitled, the President of the United States says, to 5 seats in a mid-decade redistricting. Why did he do that? You know why he did that. He knows why he did that, because he wants to rig the 2026 election before one vote is cast. Why? Because he knows he's going to lose the midterm election if we do our job. He knows he's toast. But back to the origin story about marriage equality. I imagine he thought folks like me were going to put out a press release. Say it's just so wrong. Maybe even fight to get an op-ed in the New York Times. And all of us can just commiserate and just go, boy, this world is just not. And frankly, that was the first instinct. Like, actually, I put out a tweet. People said, that was a really nice tweet. I said, thank you. I got like 500 likes. It was amazing. But it didn't feel as good as it usually does with a tweet, because people are like, well, what else are you going to do? And that was a moment, picked up the phone again, this time Nancy Pelosi. Not only did she answer it, but she did so enthusiastically, and she called Zoe Lofgren, and she called together, and we had a week to do this. She called together the California delegation, largest delegation in the state, and you talk about diversity in every way, shape, form. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, this ain't going to happen. And they all agreed, let's make this happen. And then I had to go to a legislature. There are 120 members of the legislature. All of them see themselves in Congress. And they're like, well, what about this exact block here in this district? I'm like, oh, this ain't going to happen. And they had a week. And within 2 weeks, we had plans, we had maps. We then had to make the decision, should we go forward, as we did with a special election, to redraw the maps in the state of California to fight fire with fire and push back against Trump and Trumpism. And you know what's amazing about that is how amazing you were about that. I thought it was like a California thing. I'm like, I didn't know. Like, again, you don't know what you don't know. And we kind of teased it a little bit by saying this is about all 50 states. That's why we called it Prop 50. But people from all over the United States responded in ways that were so extraordinary that, and Governor, you can appreciate this, I did something, there's no way I'll ever do this again, but I never thought I could do it. I said, stop sending us money. Just stop sending us money. Like, we were 3 weeks out. I'm like, we don't know, we're not going to be able to spend this money. And I remember sending out an email saying, stop spending money, send us money. We raised $270,000 on that one meeting. I was like, you are not taking me seriously. So I did a video saying, I am serious. Do not send us money. And I said, here are the links where you need to send money. Send them to Nevada Democratic Party. Send them to other parts of the country. And it was amazing. It was just shows, if we just stand on conviction. I don't want to, I get it. Some people said, don't mirror bad behavior. But we're at a moment. This guy is not screwing around. We will lose this country. The reasons our founding fathers lived and died, we will lose this republic. He is not screwing around. On election day in California, this was a few weeks back, it wasn't a year ago. On election day, he sent out BORTAC teams. Border Patrol tactical units. These are the folks out there, the Apache helicopters, on the morning of the election at Dodger Stadium to chill free expression and chill free speech, sending a message to communities that were already on edge. sending a message not to turn out the vote. That same morning, Trump put out on Truth Social saying the election was rigged. He sent out his own Department of Justice as election observers so that the next day he could, and he did, say the election was rigged and he had proof so he can go to the United States Supreme Court. He is not screwing around. And remember, you may not know this. Remember that Bovino character? Greg Bovino? You know, dressed up like he just, was doing a costume thing back in 1930s. We kicked off the campaign at the Democracy Center for Prop 50. It's a little Tokyo. It's a sacred site where we were interning the Japanese. It's a sacred site, Democracy Center. That's where we kicked off the campaign. We had dozens of elected officials, faith leaders, civil rights leaders. 1,000 folks showed up, but so did Bovino. And he sent his masked men, surrounded the building. A poor soul across the street that was selling strawberries disappeared. About a month later, we found him. Collateral damage. Bovino tried to intimidate every single person from walking in. I said at the time that was a preview of things to come. These guys are not screwing around. You think for a second in Nevada this November you're not going to see those BORTAC teams? You think for a second those masked men aren't going to be in and around voting booths? Mark my words, they will. They are not screwing around. I was down there in Fulton County. I was down there in Georgia just a week ago when we launched this book tour, meeting with the elections officials down there. You saw Tulsi Gabbard down there. He's trying literally to take over that election board so he can run the election in one of the most critical swing counties in the United States of America. He's trying to federalize or nationalize the election. He's trying to quite literally, we're suing him, did the same thing in Minnesota, to take the voting rolls, to purge the rolls. Look at the SAVE Act, not just about IDs. It's about registration. Who can vote that has a history in this country? They are not screwing around, but you said it, nor are we. All of us. Folks are stepping up. You're all stepping up. Folks in Minnesota stepped up. Trump's in retreat. ICE is in retreat. You're stepping up. You're stepping in. You're filling the void. You're giving us voice. You're giving us courage. For things to change, we have to change. And it's changing. You saw him in retreat in Greenland. You saw him in retreat in Minnesota. You're seeing Trump and Trumpism retreat across the spectrum. And that's because of all of you.
Wow. Yes, please, clap. So for my daughter and my daughter-in-law who live in California, they told me to tell you thank you. There are so many people in this room that for Prop 50, we didn't just send money, we made phone calls. We went to California and knocked on doors to make sure that that passed. And my little granddaughter, who's now 10 years old, she made her moms go out on election night and take snacks and water to people in line so they had dinner so they wouldn't go home so that they got to vote.
That's amazing.
So we are in this fight with you.
I love that. And just this very briefly. You know what was amazing? After the polls closed at 8 p.m., I remember leaving. I did a quick press conference saying we had won by, I think it was 22 points. And they called it within a nanosecond. I mean, it was like, right, I was like, oh gosh, I got to go. And we thought everyone would disperse. There were lines around the corner. And we thought by 8, everyone's on their cell phone waiting in line. They're like, oh, we're good, we're done. Everybody waited in line till the last vote was counted because they wanted to know their vote matters. It's a moment. You're meeting the moment. And it's extraordinary. It really is. And it should give us confidence. But again, we have to maintain the vigilance. We have to maintain the vigilance. And I say this as a guy who's been on the receiving end of this. Also, that was there, and Governor, you'll appreciate this. I never thought I'd get a call. Governor Walz calls me. And I said, Governor, what do you need? And he's going through everything in his state. And he goes, I never thought I'd ask you this, Gavin. He said, in fact, I thought you would call me to ask me for this first. I said, what? He goes, can you help me raise money for my legal defense fund? Sitting governor on a criminal offense. He's literally going after the governor and the mayor. As we speak, don't forget. I have a new signature series knee pads that are for sale on the site. Now, the reason these are new knee pads, the old knee pads sold out. Just like our universities were selling out, law firms were selling out, just like corporate leaders were selling out, just like so many members of the media have been selling out to Donald Trump. We have to call everybody out at this moment. It is all hands on deck to meet this moment.
So y'all, are we selling out? No. So we're just going to switch gears. I know we weren't going to talk a lot about the guy that's in the White House, but you know.
That's right, this is about the book.
Issues that are breaking through here in Nevada. Trump's big, ugly bill, I like to call it, is hitting working families here hard. Nevada is one of the hardest hit states. When we say when the country gets a cold, Nevada gets the flu. This bill is going to hurt healthcare costs in our state. We've seen, tourism be hit in our state. You've been a fierce opponent of that big, beautiful bill. What do you see as the short-term and the long-term impacts of this legislation?
We right after Trump won, I did something that people, honestly, they were very critical. Members of my own party. I did a special session. I didn't even wait for Trump to get sworn back in. Again, Governor and I, direct engagement, we knew what was coming. It wasn't abstract consideration. And so we put a special session together, and we flooded the zone with an appropriation, tens of millions of dollars, for litigation strategy. People say, that's not a posture yet, it's a close fit. I said, no, I hope we don't use a dollar. 60, we just filed our 60th lawsuit against the Trump administration. And that's reflected in the response. And I applaud only just in the absence of alternatives. Yes, we have to, look, the most important lesson, well, it is an important lesson. I think we tend to want to fall in love with the guy or gal on the white horse to come save the day. And I love that too. I want, West Wing music. I want, just a beautiful speech, Michael Douglas, go up there, Sorkin, and give that. You're like, oh, God. But, until, these guys, their ruthlessness, we're trying to win arguments. They're just consolidating power. We have to have a ruthlessness in 2026 to take back that House. It is the election of our lifetime. It's the old ball election. Now, that's not the short-term answer, though it is around the corner. That's right. But in the interim, it's about states. States are on the front lines of these battles. That's why governors matter. That's why legislators matter. That's why attorney generals matter at this moment. Working together, in some cases across our differences. And those litigation strategies we are organizing, we created, and Steve was one of the fierce leaders, when we were in the middle of COVID. We created this West Coast offense, we called it. And we all came together and created our own, I'll say it, we didn't use the phrase then, but it's operable, a shadow CDC. Because we had lost truth and trust. Fast forward to today with RFK. And so we reestablished, we knitted that back together. Sadly, you're not governor, so the one state that's not part of it is Nevada in this context. But we also started the Reproductive Freedom Alliance after Dobbs. And we have 26 governors, 26 states working together. Those are strategies at this moment. To compare policy strategy, compare litigation strategy, compare strategies in terms of community organizing and how we can address this moment. But the litigation strategy has been very effective. In fact, we just updated, we rolled up because it was the 60th. We've saved about 100, just in our own home state, of cuts that Trump was perpetuating, component parts and separate and above from the big, beautiful betrayal. $163 billion. Had we not done that, I mean, this guy is an extraction racket, extortion. UCLA is trying to take a $1.2 billion in front of the finest research institutions in the United States of America. And so our approach is, unfortunately, litigious. We're using our moral authority, our voice, to call this out, but also our formal authority in the context of pushing back. But the most important election to fundamentally address this, to be repairers in the spirit of Isaiah, the breach, is November election and getting Speaker Jeffries back out.
Getting that yank that we're coming towards the end, but we have...
Everyone needs a beer after this.
In the last few weeks, I've had some roundtables with some of our young people in the community, and they are engaged, they're on fire, and they're paying attention, and they're doing the work. And there's seasoned organizers in this room, been knocking doors for years. As a state party chair, I know there's a focus at the top of the ticket for the DNC, but I like to go all the way down the ballot because I believe that's where people get their foot in the door and then they move up. So as we close out today, what closing words do you have of inspiration to these people? They're here today, that means they're engaged. We got some amazing young people. I mean, I don't know if you know this, and I'm gonna kind of brag on us. We have the National High School Dems president here. Raise your hand. National High School Dems president and the National High School Dems secretary, Nevada residents. We're doing a little something in Nevada. But what parting words do you have to this collection of dedicated Democrats as we fight to take back the governor's house in 26, maintain our legislative majorities in both the Senate and the Assembly, and win back all of our constitutional offices, and then everything else down the ballot? What inspirational.
I was talking a little bit a moment ago about moral authority, and that really came from a meeting I had a week ago on this book tour. Ambassador Young, what a legend, Martin Luther King's chief of staff. And I'm done. So I mean, how blessed were you? And how blessed was I to have an hour with him last week? I had never had that privilege. He's doing unbelievably well. And he starts talking to me about all these Dr. King stories, how he visited him daily in prison and how King really needed him there every single day just to connect and check back in, his relationship with the guards and how they evolved over time. But more important, he was telling me the lesson that I never was taught about the relationship between King's movement and Gandhi, and how they all spent their time out there in India learning about nonviolence. And he was talking about some of the legends that I frankly took for granted that live in California that were leaders in this space. And it was interesting. I left that, that space in the corner with Ambassador Young, just thinking about this notion of moral authority and formal authority a little bit differently. Dr. King never served a day in elected office. We don't celebrate President Dr. King Day every year. There was never a prime minister, Gandhi. In fact, you start thinking about some of the most transformative leaders in the world. This is my message to the young folks. I mean, even in my home state, Cesar Chavez, he didn't never Governor Cesar Chavez. I'm an 80s kid. I remember Havel in Czechoslovakia, the Velvet Revolution. He talked about how governing de-geniused him. That he lost power when he gained the power of office. Even Mandela, peak of his power, peak of all of their power that I just mentioned, they probably shared in common jail time. They didn't wait to be something to do something. So for the young people out here, regardless of time of life, because a lot of us still feel young, it's about state of mind. This notion, God bless you. But this notion you don't have to be something to do something. You know, I don't have to wait to be mayor to then do something. I don't have to be governor to do something. That all of us have the remarkable capacity to do what King and Mandela and Havel and, you know, folks like Gandhi and Chavez, to, you know, so many of you do every single day in these sort of quiet, heroic ways by showing up for each other, is you exercise the one thing that Donald Trump doesn't recognize and doesn't have. And that is you can exercise your moral authority every single day. Trump only knows formal authority. All of us have that capacity. All of us are leaders in their own right. So to Madam President, to Madam Secretary, you understand that. And so keep doing that. And have the courage of your convictions. Back to my learn from, don't follow others. Your expression's unique. No one else has it. And don't compare yourself to others. It's a thief of all happiness. And so that's my message. Leadership can be found anywhere, including in all of you tonight in this room. Thank you guys very, very much for being here.
You need to get up.